You're watching Post Perspectives Meet the Artist podcast, sponsored by Puget Systems.
Hi, I'm Randy Altman from Post Perspective. Welcome to the latest episode of our Meet the Artist podcast. Today I spoke to Ramy Katrib, owner of DigitalFilm, about his career in post-production and most recently the Ted Lasso series for Apple. I hope you enjoy our conversation. I just wanted to talk a little bit about when we first met. Which I'm not going to mention years because no one needs to know how long ago that was, but it was a very long time ago. And I don't know if you had just started DigitalFilm, but you guys were all Apple-based back then.
Mm-hmm.
So
we were.
How old were you? So when you built DigitalFilm, you built it as an Apple studio?
Apple was like one of the key technologies that helped Digital Film Tree come to life. I was working at a negative cutting house, scanning film to videotape. And it was at the dawn of desktop computers being relevant to post-production and production. So we figured out how to use an Apple G3 with the first implementation of Firewire and to digitize, telecine scan of film to the cute mini DV tape. And then we worked out a workflow that worked. And that's kind of what started it. But there was also like HD Cam. It was the dawn of HD Cam, going from standard definition, from digibeta to high definition. So that was also coming online. It was the era of DV as well, DV cameras and all the documentarians, which is really how I started. It was wanting to make documentaries using DV because it was crystal clear, and you can cut it at home. So that's really what got me started. I never had the sense that it would culminate in a post house. It was just me, like so many other people, trying to make my own films. And that was really the genesis of it. There was so many different technologies at that time. Also Aurora Video Systems, and of course AJA, Grant Petty at Blackmagic was up to all kinds of stuff way back when. So it was a small community. When we met, it was literally just a few, maybe 100 people, maybe worldwide, a few thousand people that were exploring emerging technologies. And I think that's why we're still hanging out. Like, you still reach out if you have a question about like some technology or emerging trend, because that curiosity, clearly it's still here with you. It's still here with me. For me, it's like 25 years, which is astounding that it went by so fast. So that's like half my life, So yeah, Apple was a big part of it, but there was so many other technologies that were also part of it, and people.
Well, it's true. And with Final Cut Pro, but then you guys, you moved on from that. Obviously you sort of had to, but you're an independently owned post house. And you have been all these years, which is pretty remarkable. You haven't been eaten by anyone. So that says a lot about how you have evolved your business. So maybe just get a little bit into that.
Mm-hmm. I think we were always too weird to be considered by private equity. We never really made sense. In the beginning, it was technology driven. We had to figure out things so we can survive. The fuel that kept it going is the interest in creativity, right? Like, why would people obsess on making something work that didn't work so well in the beginning if they weren't interested in telling a story? So that was the fuel, the impetus to persist and stay up all night. It makes me think when we did Scrubs season 2, laying down to digibeta from an old SCSI drive in our first office on the Sunset Strip, and that was a disaster. Like, you would have to try 15 times to land that program on hour 1 on a digibeta in an environment that looked nothing like a traditional post house. And if anyone saw what we were back then, they would probably be horrified. But I think we were so motivated to be part of the creative process, and that kind of ethos is still part of DFT. And then I think, you know, corporate approach doesn't necessarily have that kind of um, tenacity, right? Like if you're part of investment or part of a larger roll up or whatnot, there's other things in play, like financial benchmarking and financial performance. And we've always kind of just enjoyed this type of lifestyle. I think it's been, independence feels good now, through the years, you know, like even when the tsunami happened, there was a lot of trepidation. Like, how are we going to survive? Like, how are we going to adjust? But I think it's just the lifestyle of it all, the culture, the people that have been at DFT in the beginning, many of whom have moved on. Some are still with us after 20 plus years. Um, we've tripled since the pandemic in size. Um, so we're not like necessarily a super small company. We're more like a 60, 70 person company now. Um, I did experience building a software and selling it to private equity, and actually I had a relatively positive experience. But for some reason, after that, I wanted to come back and double down on DFT, which on face level is a service-based company, but it's really more like what we get to do and the people that we work with, and apply like some of the, you know, best processes. Um, we're always in research and development. That's the cool thing. We're always investigating like the latest and greatest tech and how it could help us or help our clients. That alone is a full-time job. It's one thing to build a new technology, but it's also a thing to research what the hell is out there, because there's a shit ton of technology out there today, more than I have ever seen. And just being thoughtful to review, to test, to validate, like that, we put a lot of value on that. And that takes the right type of team, the right type of culture to see what's out there, to test it, to meet the people who make it. And before endeavoring to build our own tech, which we do. But now we're much more thoughtful about it. We do a lot more research than we have historically, and we have more people that are part of the research team, which includes infrastructure, networking, and security.
Yeah. Well, you guys do, you sort of combine the tech and the creative. And I remember when you introduced that product, I think it was at NEB um,
Hmm.
years ago. But some of the best tools are built out of necessity by post houses that just have a need and they need to fix it and they do it. But now, as you say, there's so much technology that you could sort of take bits and pieces of that and build on it, which I'm assuming that's
Hmm.
easier than doing it from the ground up.
It's easier, and sometimes it's better. Best case scenarios, if you can have multiple pieces that um, are excellent at what they do, and to bridge those things together. That is um, kind of an art form, right? So take tools like Nuke or tools like Unreal and tools like Resolve, and bridge those tools together in a way that's novel. So you're not creating something new, but the bridge is new. The way they interact, and oftentimes it's really driven by the people, right? So I'm like a lot more sensitive to the team, and how they express their pain points. Also, clients, like when there's a client challenge or a team member challenge, that's kind of what turns everyone on. It's almost like the problems is what's interesting, as opposed to, oh no, there's a problem. we run towards the problems. It's weird. It's like a lifestyle. In fact, people get bored if there isn't a problem, like something exquisitely that's hard to do, or especially if people say, well, you can't do that. Like, for example, when we started moving camera raw through the internet, like 6, 7, 8 years ago, the one thing I remember is people say, well, you can't do that. Like, you can't do that. That's like in the future. I think if people didn't say that, we wouldn't be as interested in doing it the way we have. So we've always endeavored to do things that seemingly are not possible at this point, um, just because it's interesting and never boring.
You mentioned the tsunami before and how that sort of made the industry wake up and move on and embrace, sort of get off the fence about the way that they worked. And I think COVID did the same thing. It made people come up with different ways to work, and you guys did that. You kept working through COVID. In fact, I believe you were still working on Ted Lasso during that period of time. So, just talk a little bit about how you pivoted. Were you prepared ahead of time? Did you was it something that you were hoping to implement and then just had to out of necessity, or did you just scramble because it was a problem and you guys thrive on problems?
Yeah, definitely thrive on problems. If I reckon back to the tsunami, at that time, file based, the notion of a file versus a physical asset like a tape or a film, that was making its way through the industry, right? A lot of people were using Final Cut Pro to cut offline. Um, the post process was in progress of being digitized. But when the tsunami happened and tapes weren't available, that kind of forced a much harder pivot to where am I going to put my data? So the LTO, which we had been using for years, wasn't really interesting to our clients at the time. Like, who would use an LTO and why? We have tape. But because we had been using it, it was an easy pivot for us. So we would socialize with our clients and the community that we're able to back up this way. This is how we do it. And then, the people of like mind that were also doing things like that would come together, and then it becomes a routine over the course of a year or two. So that was a hard pivot to everything being digital as opposed to tape. In a similar fashion, before the pandemic, we had really bet the farm on the notion that people can work remotely. Um, but it wasn't really that popular. Like, we would socialize it with clients and studios, with the community, and you know, we didn't get a lot of play, so to speak. They thought it was interesting that you could work remotely from home or from wherever, and the process it takes to set someone up like that. But we had made enough noise about it that when the pandemic happened, a lot of people approached us that had met with us before, that had heard what we were saying, and all of a sudden they had to work from home. So for us, it was a trip, to all of a sudden pivot to something that we were advocating and doing ourselves with our staff, to something that was mandatory, like overnight. And I think that's why we grew in the pandemic. We not only didn't shut down, we added staff through the whole pandemic, and we're on that momentum still. I mean, there's still so much work to do in terms of how do you network people together, how do you secure the media, how do you deal with the nuanced challenges of VFX versus color versus online versus deliverables? How do you socialize something like previs to the scripted TV community that have never used it, right? And to do it from a Zoom, from the comfort of your home. Um, it was a perfect storm for us. And even though it was, you know, it's hard to describe it in positive terms because it was the worst thing that arguably has happened in human history, but from the standpoint of people continuing to work, we played a role there. And it's a testament to the team, to our culture here, and how we support people. The tech is one thing, but how you communicate it and help someone apply it, that's where the action is. That's human.
You're watching Post Perspectives Meet the Artist podcast, sponsored by Puget Systems.
Didn't virtual production play a role in how you kept working throughout COVID? Didn't you start, I think you started then, but maybe you had started before then, using that technique to keep people sort of separate but together?
hmm I think it really magnified on when we were working on Umbrella Academy season 3, and everyone was in different places. The pandemic was upon us. So the writers were in one location, production was in Toronto. People were all around the world. So, being able to do something as simple as a Zoom session, sharing your, either Unity or Unreal user interface, start building out the environment, and then having all these stakeholders like the VFX supervisor, Everett Burrell, and the showrunner, and the director, and the DP come together on a Zoom session and hash out the story per the script. Oftentimes, the script wasn't even done, which makes it really interesting. And it was fascinating to be part of that, where when the script that comes from your head is then visualized, it actually affects the vision. And they're like, oh, is that what it looks like? So then they'll make tweaks based on just the visual reference. That's kind of like a living storyboard, as it were. And by all measures, it seems to have improved their process, because what they tell us is it made things clearer, not only to them, but to all the departments. It's like prototyping all of the things that have to happen in real life, in physical production, for the story to be realized. It was like architecture, blueprinting, prototyping, simulating, all these adjectives that are used. But for us, it was just helping them tell a better story. And when Lasso came around, also during the pandemic, season 1, right? No one knew anything, because it hadn't existed yet. So we started simulating their soccer scenes, because soccer, actors are not necessarily professional soccer players. So to prototype and plan the movements, the blocking, the camera setups, was very helpful. I even say it's just a humble little tool that kind of helps the camera department, helps even the writers' room, the VFX supervisors. It brings people together with like a clear plan, as it were. So all those things happened during the pandemic.
Just talking about how technology is helping. Everybody's talking about AI right now and how it can maybe help with repetitive tasks, but how it could also possibly take some jobs away. People aren't sure what's going to happen. What's your take on that?
I mean, AI is already transforming so many industries, whether it's software development, manufacturing. I mean, you name it. I think it's also starting to transform the media and entertainment industry in ways that are hard to comprehend, because it's happening so fast. There's already programs out there that have been created with AI. Some are cool, some are creepy. But the fact that it's already there, empirically there, um, means that the transformation is already in progress. Um, for us, the way we've been applying AI, even going back some time, right? Because I think with Chat GTP, there's been uptick in interest, right? Worldwide interest. governments are now trying to plan how AI will affect society. Um, but for us, it was really applying AI for things that are tedious, things that are repetitive, things that take time. Um, like in our reality, we don't see any world where AI takes over for a position we have. That's not to say that it won't happen in other industries. And I know of a lot of businesses and industries that have already laid off departments or individuals based on AI. That's not our case because the people, right, the culture of DFT together is what's creating the AI. So the AI without the people educating what the AI does is not meaningful to us. In fact, we spend most of our time just meeting, discussing, comparing notes. A lot of times there's people of like mind within our team, and sometimes there's people of not of like mind. But I like that. That's kind of cool. Like there's got to be some rigor here to how we will apply AI. And right now, we're defining all these use cases for AI in visual effects and dailies and how we manage our data, um, how we apply security methodologies. All of those things are impacted by AI. But to me, they're like it's more practical AI. It's not hitting a home run with some product that will auto correct your color or something like that. I know that's in play, but we're kind of digging deep on more of the mechanical process of post production and how we can streamline that ever further for the benefit of our team and defined by our team.
So I can't let you go before we talk about the elephant in the room, which is the writer strike. How is that affecting your business? How do you see it affecting the industry as a whole?
It's affecting the industry um, globally. Um, it's I think there's a lot of solidarity with the writers and the actors, and I mean, think about it, the people who bring the stories to life so that we could work and finish. Um, in the same vein, it's a tough stretch, I think, for our industry because of all the businesses that are part of this industry, the downstream businesses, the below the line businesses, the craft services, the vendors. Um, this is a really tough stretch. Um, for us, we're using it as an opportunity to catch up on our to-do list. So R&D is now much more magnified because we have more time. Usually when we're busy, our bandwidth to look into things is limited because we're engaged on projects. Now our bandwidth is much more pointed towards research, development, cross training our team. So the best way to describe Digital Film Tree's culture is it is definitely about technology, but culturally, it's about people from different departments coming together to improve upon the process, not only for ourselves but for our clients. So time invested in that is profound. Um, we're right now doing probably the most comprehensive cross training across dailies, color, online, pre-visualization, visual effects that we've ever endeavored to do. And what happens is the team gets stronger. So it's the best investment possible to essentially provide a culture where people can be ever more interdisciplinary, right? Not just in your lane, but kind of see all these other lanes that are happening and join those lanes. And also interdependent, right? The more you know about someone else's department or their process, the more interdependent you can be to support each other. Um, so so that's kind of an opportunity for us. So we're looking at it in a very positive way, and then there's other opportunities that we're focusing on, like state of the art restoration, pre-existing programs that we can get our hands on and then remaster them in ways that are extraordinary. It's crazy. I still get excited about when we can like scan an 8 millimeter or 16 millimeter, which we can do thanks to our engineer Greg Filkins, who built his own scanner. And then you scan that little 8 millimeter and you can go through a full like Dolby Vision finish and bring it to life in ways that the clients who own the material are astounded. Like that's terribly exciting, and it's kind of interesting that it's also part of our past. So there's all kinds of projects that we're focusing on, that we can still move forward on during the strike.
Right. And you're getting stronger for when the strike is over and work is happening again. So that makes perfect sense. What is next for you guys in terms of projects? Was there anything in the pipeline before things got wonky?
Yeah, there's quite a few. Some of them have gone on hiatus. So I think once they come back on, they will hit us like a freight train. We're working on more independent films, which is cool. We're working on a project called Grizzly Nights. We used to mostly do film, and then early on we gravitated towards television. Now we're starting to pivot back to independent film, and with the goal of working on bigger budget films as well, because the workflows are so similar now. So for this film, we did pre-visualization better than we ever have before, and it's kind of cool. We visualized the script in a way that helps the filmmakers, and there's an animal handler involved. So even an animal handler is looking at the previs so that it helps him in his process. And we have several other indie films in the queue. And then I don't know which projects I can talk about publicly, but there's a fair amount of projects that are coming down the pike based on the success of our clients and how they've grown. When our clients succeed, then new projects tend to come online, and there we are with them, empowering them.
Ramy, thank you for taking the time. I really appreciate it. It's always fun to chat with you. Maybe we'll do it in person next time.
Let's definitely do that.
Thank you for watching Post Perspectives Meet the Artist podcast, sponsored by Puget Systems. For more information, please visit PugetSystems.com.